When you play a Sonic game, what mode do you normally select? New game, story mode, maybe even the stage select. But how many times have you actually delved into the additional game modes that are present in these games? They can be the mission modes, multiplayer, trials, tech, survival, and even party modes. Well, in some games I did do it, but in most I never bothered. And in a mission to actually experience these games' entire content, I went out of my way to play all, well, most, additional modes in Sonic games. So today I'm gonna cover them for you. This is not gonna be a deep dive or an analysis of each of these modes, or a coverage of every single extra mode in every single game. I'm literally just gonna show them to you and speak a little bit about them and what I like and dislike, showing you some cool stuff about them too. You'll be surprised at how fleshed out some of these are, considering that a lot of them either go unnoticed, unplayed, or unmentioned most of the time. With that said, it's about time someone gives them the time of day. So, since there are a lot of them, and I'm really only going to cover the games from Adventure 1 onwards, as the classics don't really feature any extra modes besides multiplayer, I chose to organize them into 3 big categories, being missions, multiplayer, and other modes that don't fit either criteria and don't appear in other games often enough to be their own category, such as the Chao Garden difficulty modes, etc. Starting by mission modes, let's take a look at Sonic Adventure. Well, Sonic Adventure DX, since the missions are only present in this version of the game as additional content. You can only play them after finishing all stories, including the last story. Afterwards, you can enter the mission mode, which at first looks identical to the normal adventure modes, hence why I was so confused when I loaded into Station Square. But if you explore for a bit, you can locate these mission cards. Running into them will start a mission and give you its description, which should suggest where you have to go and what you need to do. There are 60 unique missions in the game, which would make you believe that there are 10 per all 6 characters. But that's not the case, since Sonic has the mission hegemony, having like 25. Some of these missions are... I wouldn't say good exactly, as they are all pretty quick, pretty easy, or just boring, but some are innovative and moderately amusing, such as the one where you need to cut the weeds in Tails' workshop, but the majority of them are literally just collect the flags or a coin, pop the balloon, take this statue from here to there, or kill X number of enemies, and as big, fish this fish here, as Knuckles dig in this place to get whatever. It's usually pretty bland, sadly. Some of them, as I've mentioned, are innovative and amusing, but some end up just being really weird, such as the mission where you have to place the burger shop statue next to Metal Sonic as Gamma, because he's lonely and needs a friend, or the one where you have to save the same statue from drowning as Amy. I have to come clean, I didn't actually complete all 60 missions, but I did complete most of Sonic and Tails' missions, as well as 4 or 5 for the other characters. Well, I did complete the ones I could for Sonic and Tails, because some of the mission cards didn't appear for me. For example, Mission 28's card is supposed to be here, on top of the hotel entrance. I didn't remember activating this mission, so I removed some mods thinking they were messing with the missions, but it still wasn't there. It turns out that I vaguely remember doing one mission, the first one as Sonic, a long time ago in this save, and had apparently activated this mission and 2 others as well, but I thought the game didn't save the fact you activated the mission before completing it, so I had a ton of cards missing for missions that were already active from like 2 years ago. The mission prompt most times is also really vague and doesn't really suggest anything. Kinda reminds me of the Sonic 06 achievement instructions. At first I tried to do the missions without looking anything up online, but I just couldn't. Read the description of Mission 11 for Sonic. Destroy the windmill and proceed. Find a balloon in orbit. What? It turns out you have to go to Windy Valley, where at the start there are a bunch of floating islands you can attack to climb and get the balloon. Okay, its location remotely suggests it's supposed to be around this area, but this one I just can't. I can't get into the bathroom. How could I have let something like this happen to me? This is Mission 42 for Gamma. You need to go to Hot Shelter, clear the corridors at the start as well as the toilets. Mission 45 says, go to a place where the rings are laid in the shape of Sonic's face. I didn't even know this existed in the game, but you have to go to this area of Final Egg no one ever went to. Even though I'm talking a lot of shit, I do think some are pretty clever, such as fighter aircraft are flying everywhere. Somebody get me out of here. Where you have to move the Burgerman statue in Skydeck. They are subtle enough to not give it away immediately, but also not ridiculously hard to make out, like the Lonely Metal Sonic one by the way, with its position suggesting his quote-unquote new friend is hiding in the jungle, but in reality is just below him in the lower floor of the base. You might be wondering, why the hell would I ever play these? Well, completing all of these missions, as well as getting all emblems, will progressively unlock all 12 of the Game Gear games made available to play in this part. You might also be asking, why would I play the inferior version of all of these games? The next missions in line are Sonic Heroes. They are not nearly as complex or fleshed out, if you can really call it that, as SA1s, as they are exactly the same for all stages for one specific team. Team Sonic's alternate mission is to complete a level in a strict time limit. They are literally the same stages all over again, but with set time limits. Some are a cool change of pace, because make no mistake, there are a few tough limits here, especially for the easier stages, which become not so easy anymore. But the harder stages, say Power Plant for example, have a really generous time limit and thus are ridiculously easy. The hard part is usually getting enough points to get an A rank here while still making it on time, but even then most of them are not really harder than their normal iterations. As for Team Dark, you have to destroy a set number of enemies. You know the Team Chaotix mission in Grand Metropolis, where you have to destroy all badniks, but there's always 2 or 3 that never spawn and are seemingly bugged, until you find out that they only spawn if you go through a very specific path. Imagine that, but for all stages. It's as fun as it sounds. Team Rose is the same thing, collect a number of rings, it's really easy. Lastly, Team Chaotix is kind of fun actually. Their missions are basically their normal ones, but on steroids. If you have to collect something, the amount is bigger, same thing for killing enemies and such. Some more specific ones, like getting the Chao in Ocean Palace, you have to complete the entire stage while being undetected with Espio's camouflage. It's by far the most challenging and the most unique one, even though it's a mix of 2 already existing missions. But considering the other teams, Chaotix probably has the best missions out of the bunch. Once again, the question becomes, what do I get from doing all of these? Well, getting an A rank in every single stage, including the missions, will unlock super hard modes, which will make you play all stages again as Team Sonic, but with a harder object layout basically. SA2 also has a similar style of missions that will unlock Green Hill if you get an A rank in all stages, but it's not that interesting as the missions are also always the same for all characters. The next missions are in Sonic Riders. Here you have 3 different sets of missions: Jets, Waves and Storms. There are 5 missions per all 8 race courses for Storm and Wave, so 40 for each, and 5 per all 4 extra missions for Jet, so 20 for him. At first I thought you'd play as them in their own set of missions, as they are supposed to be in their schedule, but you ever only play as Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, and as Amy and Cream twice. The missions themselves are a set of single lap races, where you can get bronze, silver or gold medals depending on how well you performed. The missions are more creative than Heroes' at least, even though most of the time they're the usual get X quantity of Y thing and finish the race in less than Z seconds, or do this and finish the race before Jet for example. The ones that should, in theory, be fun, like mission 1 of Jet where you have to run away from him and keep a speed of at least 140, or the missions where you have to get points by doing tricks, are fucking ridiculous. The trick points one, you need a lot of them, so getting the gold medal is really hard for me. I wasn't able to crack the code for that one. And one of those missions in Waves Metal City, I wasn't even able to get bronze, I was always 1 point down. And the speed mission, if you ever go to 130 or below, the mission ends right there and then, and it's not easy at all to always be above that speed while keeping your boost and being able to collect every ring that you see so you get extra air. The point of the missions is clearly to get gold medals, so you can unlock the rest of the playable characters as well as some other extreme gears you can buy. Well, if you complete all of them with at least a bronze medal, you'll get the extra characters, being Ai, Knights and Ulala, but getting the gold medals in all of them unlocks the Chaos Emerald gear as well as the other 4 remaining ones. If you don't know what using the Chaos Emerald gear looks like, Yeah, it's pretty overpowered. I didn't complete all missions, of course, as I would probably still be completing them as you're watching this video, because there is no in-between in difficulty for these missions. They are either piss easy or really fucking hard, just unfairly hard, which doesn't make them very fun. It does make them rewarding, but not in a good way, you're just glad it's over. But yeah, let's get into Sonic 06. You may not even remember that Sonic 06 has missions. At least I didn't, until I read about it and saw them being referred as town missions. Oh yeah, that's right, the NPC missions are missions. And I had completely forgotten about that. Even though they are not really that fun, they are very amusing and absolutely iconic. Some of them are mandatory to progress, such as the Window of a Shoemaker, which is Sonic's first one, or the Get into the Station mission for Silver. But most of them are completely optional, and even though they are not very fleshed out, they are worth checking out either way. I think the most iconic one is Who's the Captain? You're supposed to talk to this guy who tells you if you can figure out who the captain is, the guard will let you through Dusty Desert. You can talk with the guards all you want, none of them are the captain, because the captain is the same fucking guy. The world record for this mission is literally less than a second, you can just talk to him again. Find Pele the Beloved Dog is also a pretty amusing one, where you have to rescue a dog who belongs to a boy called Pinto. I have no fucking idea how he lost it, he's not even that far away. Okay, maybe the most iconic mission is the Sonic Man one, even though I guess he's more iconic than the mission itself. I'm sure you all know who he is, no introduction needed. All you do in his mission is race against him, which is really easy because he's slower than you. There are also the tests that some NPCs put upon you, which are all fine except for the intelligence ones, because I'm really stupid when it comes to these. Sonic has the test of intelligence, where you have to go through the right sequence of warp holes. The mission is purely based on trial and error, but I always get stuck here for so long I keep forgetting where each portal leads, I just hate it. Shadow has the mathematician's training, where he gives you a sequence of numbers you have to memorize and then destroy the boxes accordingly. The footage speaks for itself. Lastly, Silver has the test of memory, which is actually really easy because you just need to answer the questions. He asks what comes to mind when you hear those sets of words, which if you pay a minimum of attention to the game, then you're able to complete it really easily. The other missions I haven't covered literally just involve killing enemies in a certain amount of time, or going through orange rings, or collecting something, going after someone, stuff like that. The intro dialogue for some of these is crazy, I'll say that much. Did you know that Sonic Unleashed has missions? I'm not talking about the DLC stages or even the NPC ones. I'm talking about actual missions. Strangely, I did know this, but apparently there are a lot of people that don't know, or at least don't remember, because I don't think anyone has willingly completed all of them. Not even all stages have them, and the Hedgehog has none, so you can guess how much attention was put into them. When I selected Windmill Isle, I saw they were all level 3 missions, so I thought, maybe they get harder as you complete them and they level up progressively. But apparently that's not the case, their level is defined by stage, so it won't level up or anything, it's just set like that. So, the stages have 3 generic trials that could apply to all stages, but don't for some reason, and 3 specific stage trials. The generic ones are the time trial, which is exactly what it suggests it is. You have to complete a stage in a pretty strict time limit. This I think is the only difficult mission, because you actually have to lock in even if you're pretty good at the game, so it's quite nice. The battle trial, where you have to destroy a set number of enemies. It really makes you realize that the game doesn't have many enemies to begin with, as a lot of them are hidden out of sight or you boost so fast that you don't even see them, so I guess that's the hardest part of it. And the ring trial, which is exactly what it sounds. This is really easy, as the boost literally just acts as the magnet shield and all rings follow you. For the level 1 stages you can reach the limit in under 10 seconds, that's how easy it is. Now the specific ones, the first one is the Tower of Ghosts. It's very out of place. You have to skydive in that tower from Rooftop Run and get the 2 ghosts, then hit the gold ring at the bottom. That's literally it. Even so, I managed to fail 5 times. 3 of them because I was too fast and missed 1 ghost, another because I died right at the start, and another one because I drowned. Committing Medical is also really easy. It takes place at the start of Arid Sands, and if you go slow enough, you can break all 10 boxes in 15 seconds or so. And Ice Dream also takes place in Arid Sands, where you have to complete a portion of the stage as quickly as possible to get a bottle of milk. Even though I didn't grab any info on the NPC missions, because I had completely forgotten they existed, a lot of them are just talking or answering questions, collecting or buying something for an NPC, killing some enemies, or finishing a portion of the stage, all within a time limit, similarly to 06, except not nearly as tedious. I actually recommend you do these ones, as the dialogue is pretty amusing and you actually get to know more about these characters. The last game I wanted to mention for missions is Sonic Generations. These are pretty well known and are actually mandatory to progress in the game, even though you only ever need to do 9 of them to get the keys. But I never did all of them, nor have most people done so. Completing all missions is actually an achievement in the game, and according to Steam, only 5.8% of people have done it. There are 90 missions in the game. Of course I didn't do all of them, just a few of all types, with 5 for both modern and classic Sonic for each stage, so 10 per level. There are also 9 types of missions, with 3 of them being exclusive to classic Sonic. These missions are a lot more fleshed out and creative compared to what we have seen so far, so they are by far the best in my opinion. Plus, I completed most of these missions with modern Sonic, just so you know there won't be much classic coverage. Starting by the speed type mission, you either get a bigger boost gauge which you can't refill, so if you run out of boost you'll be stuck walking for the remainder of the stage, even though you have like 10 missions to get to the goal and the S rank is really forgiving anyways. The object layout is also quite different most times, so it's a cool new challenge for anyone interested in that. There are also other speed challenges, mostly involving you getting to the goal through a specific path in a set time. The technique missions might be my favorites by far. They are as close as these missions get to actual trials, with most of them actually being quite difficult and honestly very enjoyable. Crisis City was my favorite. It's basically a puzzle where you have to press the right switches to progress to different areas, with a lot of backtracking, trial and error, and actual thinking. I loved it. Rooftop Run features a somewhat difficult obstacle course at first, but the more you play it, the more you understand how it works, so it doesn't become that difficult after like 2 or 3 tries. I also played a few more, with most being slow and careful platforming. Not all of them are exactly good. Planet Wisp's one is particularly annoying, where you have to use the orange rocket to go up, with a lot of enemies and obstacles in your path which immediately cancel the ability. It's not very fun, but besides that one, a lot of them are very enjoyable. Now the most known, and the one I always did to get the keys, the Doppelganger race. There isn't much to it really. You basically play the entire stage again against a dumbass ghost that won't be even halfway through the stage when you finish it. Also probably one of the most known of the bunch, the friend missions. You can use these friends as special abilities for the stage, with the character used being the one you saved from that stage. You normally have to use them to clear parts of the level that have obstacles that Sonic can traverse through on his own, such as the enemies in Seaside Hill that will always block your attacks, so you have to use Rouge's charm to stun them, or in Crisis City where there are huge fires that block your path, so you have to use Blaze to clear them, you get it. Not all of them are like this, such as Rooftop Run where you have to throw music notes back at Vector that get progressively harder to hit, which is probably my favorite one. Unlike the other missions, most of these use the remix of Sonic 3D Blast's main theme, which feels a bit out of place for some stages, but is quite funny. As I've said, Classic Sonic also features these, but I only played the race against Amy in Sky Sanctuary, and it wasn't anything special. Enemy missions are much like what we have seen so far, a portion of the level with a different object layout, namely more enemies placed everywhere to make the stage more difficult, nothing much to add. And the last shared for both characters, the ring mission. This is probably my least favorite by far. You literally just chase after a sprinkler badnik that drops rings, which is quite tedious. You can even get it to stop at specific points to just get the threshold needed. The hardest part is usually keeping them, because if you get hit, you have to go through the painstaking process of getting all rings from the badnik all over again. Now the exclusive Classic Sonic missions. The first one is Item. The level basically revolves in you getting as many item boxes of one power-up as possible, so you always have it active. Some areas of the level can only be traversed with this specific power-up, but a lot of them seem completely manageable level without ever picking them up. Some are cool, like Ricey City for example, with the flame shield making for some great movement. Juggle is another contender for the worst one in my opinion. It's based on that mechanic from the classic games, where if you keep hitting the goalpost it won't end the stage and will keep spinning in the air. Here the objective is exactly the same, except you have to transport it through the entire stage. Doing it is not exactly hard, as even if it approaches the ground it takes a lot of time until it actually penalizes you. And it doesn't even end the stage, it just adds 5 seconds to the timer. It's just very slow and boring I think. The last one for Generations is Rescue, also for classic Sonic. This one is relatively easy. You play a stage while rescuing a number of animals stuck inside capsules within the time limit. It's a nice challenge actually, at least compared to the other classic Sonic missions. Okay, even though I said Generations was the last game, I remember the game that I actually did a lot of missions for, which is Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. I might be the only one that actually did most of these, and I had really done all of them on my PS3, as there are 64 of them and no one really cares enough about this game besides me. The missions themselves are probably what you would expect. Every character has a unique one, with the most popular ones having more, which is normal, with some being fun, though most fall into the generic spectrum. Win against this character, complete a race or the lap in X seconds, etc. There are some that are really annoying and really hard for absolutely no reason. The one I immediately think of is the Monkey Trouble mission with the Bonanza Bros, where you have 60 seconds to go through rings that give you points, which in turn give you a better rank. And I just can't get more than an A. The highest rank for these missions is AAA, and I have it in all missions except this one. I literally can't. I think you actually have to devise an optimal route to get all of these, because it's just not humanly possible if you do it on a whim. But yeah, it's additional content for this game, which for me is good enough already, and I do like most of the missions, so yeah, it's positive. I know that there are other games with missions, such as Zero Gravity, Free Riders, Rush Adventure, Origins, but they fall into the exact same categories as all the other ones, and I don't think they are as interesting. Even so, make sure to check out any mission mode in the future, because they're always there for a reason. Given this, let's take a look at multiplayer modes. If you're like me, you had no one to play Sonic games with as a child. It doesn't really mean you hadn't any friends, you just didn't have any that wanted to play Sonic with you. Well, fortunately I'm older now, and it so happens that I do have friends that want to play Sonic with me, even though sort of forced to do so, but there is no need to mention that. The best part about this is that you can actually play these games, which really only support local multiplayer, online. Yeah, you heard that right. And I'm actually gonna teach you how to do it. If you want to play any games released for the GameCube or the Wii with your friends, you can use Dolphin's NetPlay feature. By going into the Tools tab, you'll see two options called Start NetPlay and Browse NetPlay Sessions. If you want to host to your friends, you have to select the first option. Go to the Host tab and select the game you want to host. You can select two different connection types. I recommend selecting Direct Connection, as it saves you a lot of hassle. Keep in mind that you need to have the same Dolphin version and the exact same game ROM. In your lobby, you should choose to load and write a host save data, if you trust your friends enough, and to sync every action replay or gecko codes. You should also select fair input delay, so it's the same for every player, which can be tweaked in the buffer box below, and that's basically it. Keep in mind that some games can only be played if you disable dual core, like Sonic Heroes, and to assign the correct controller ports when playing Wii games, as they usually come unassigned. For every other emulator, such as Xenia, you can use a program that I'm definitely not associated with or sponsored by, called Parsec. Both of you will need to have the program downloaded, one to host and the other to join. Most of the settings that come by default are already optimized, but do make sure you change the decoder to anything other than software if available, as it will use your GPU instead. In host settings, just enable hosting and keep your own resolution, and adjust the bandwidth limit to whatever you think your internet supports best. Make sure to select the right monitor and to download the latest driver for the USB gamepads. The app immediately tells you if you don't have the latest supported version, so just download that. And then select the quality option you think is best. I like to keep it at balanced, and everything should be ready to go. You can send an invite link to your friend for them to join, but it didn't really work for us, so I just added them as a friend in the app, as you do need to create an account to use this. So invite them to connect to your computer, have them connect their gamepads, and test if everything works as it should. For us, it was that simple. This should work with every emulator and every game you can think of, so go wild. Just know the experience won't be as pleasant to whoever's connecting as it is in Dolphin, because they'll be seeing a stream of your computer. So, let's actually get into multiplayer with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. It was the first mainline 3D game to introduce multiplayer, and for a first time, they nailed it. There are 6 modes here, though we only played 4 as we didn't have enough Chao for a Chao race or karate. The first one is the Action Race Battle, where you can select Sonic, Shadow, Amy, or Metal Sonic. All stages, being basically identical to the normal ones you play through in story modes, are present here, with 2 extra ones with unique gimmicks. One is a snow version of the city escape boarding segment, which is fun, and the other one is a grinding stage, which we didn't play. The stages are separated by levels, from easiest to hardest, and we played one of each level. I can say with certainty that, if you both enjoy the normal SA2 stages, then you'll enjoy this mode as well. There isn't much to it really, it just works without reinventing the wheel. The characters do have some different abilities here though, such as being able to damage you or freeze time if you're too far ahead, which makes for more of a challenge. The second one is the Treasure Hunt Race, where you can select Knuckles, Rouge, Tikal, and Chaos. We didn't play one of each level here, as my friend wasn't very keen on doing so. I was, because I've played these fucking stages so much because of videos that I started liking them. But this consists in a best of 3 of collecting emeralds, so whoever collects 2 first wins the match. If you like these stages, then you'll also enjoy their multiplayer variants, as they play pretty much the same. The characters also have abilities that can not only damage you but invert the controls, which can and will fuck you up almost always, so yeah. The third one is the Shooting Battle, where you play as Tails, Eggman, or one of the Chao. The concept of the mode would lead you to believe that it's a 1v1 much like Tails vs Eggman at the start of the game, but it's not the case at all. It's a race of destroying doors and getting through obstacles similarly to the normal stages, though you can actually go onto each other's path and mess with each other. Well, I lied, because there actually are stages dedicating to 1v1ing each other, and contrary to the other minigames, where if you didn't enjoy their normal variants, you wouldn't enjoy the multiplayer, I'd argue it's different this time around. I don't really enjoy Tails' boss fights, but these battles are great fun. The last one is the Kart Race, which is also available as a single player mode. This is the one I enjoyed the least, even though I still did, but mostly because the controls aren't very great, and we were always colliding with the same fucking wall every single lap. The lack of other maps doesn't add much replayability either, so we only played it once. Afterwards, we moved on to Sonic Heroes. This is the one I always wanted to play with someone, and always entered this menu thinking how great it would be if I had someone to play with the menu music being really nostalgic to me for that reason. The few times I had played it, in my head I thought I had enjoyed it, but apparently I don't enjoy it much. There are 7 different modes playable, though 3 of which are races which include the first act of almost every stage, so Seaside Hill, Grand Metropolis, Casino Park, you get it. Starting by the stage races, they're separated into Action Race, Quick Race, and Expert Race. The only one that functions differently is the Quick Race, which, as its name suggests, is quick and basically has both teams race to the middle having to overcome a bunch of different obstacles, with the stage being symmetrical. Both of us enjoyed this iteration of the races more than the Action and Expert ones, as unlike the SA2 stages, these don't work very well right out of the bat. The first issue is that the normal levels are really big. Not to make the stages too big for what's supposed to be a replayable and fun experience, they're shortened down a lot, with the goal ring being much closer to the start. The problem is that it's too close to the start, so when it feels like it's just getting started, the race ends, and if you go behind, there is basically no way to recover. The quick race is different in this sense because the levels are actually designed for the sole purpose of being quick, and are uniquely dependent on skill, as the other player doesn't have a say in your actions. It's not that the quick or expert races are bad in themselves, because the levels should be as good as the normal ones, but what made the normal levels good in the first place were their entirety, so they should have been longer than they are in multiplayer, or designed completely differently, even though I do understand that might not be logistically plausible. Even so, there are other modes here, such as Battle, which functions identically to the team battles in story mode, though this time you fight in different arenas or in the same ones, but they look very different, which is a nice touch. This can be fun only and only if you you play a certain way, which is not spamming the fly character. We tried this method for the first battle, and we're actually trying to fight using all characters and not just spamming, but for the other battles we didn't really bother and it went exactly as you think it did. It's the actual mechanics fault, not exactly the multiplayer integration, so it's pretty much as you expect it to be. The next one is the special stage battle. It also works identically to story modes, so if you don't enjoy these, then it's not gonna be for you. We knew it wasn't for us from the get-go, so yeah. The penultimate one is the ring race. The objective of this one is to collect as many rings as possible while the other player is able to damage you. This can be fun and a great challenge in the Hedgehog battle, but the other two are really painful. One of them is Casino Park, so I think that's self-explanatory, while the other one is one of the elevators in Power Plant, which is a really small arena with very few rings, so if you die once, you're done for, because the other player can literally spawn kill you with the fly character while keeping all their rings, which, as you can probably guess, it isn't very fun. The last one is by far my favorite, the bobsled race. It feels like all of the multiplayer budget was poured into this one, because it actually features completely different stages with their own level model and object layout, which is a breath of fresh air, while still being fun, engaging and challenging at the same time. I think for us it was the only one we can say we had fun, because all the other ones just felt boring or bland in comparison. You really have to pay attention not to hit anything, because the bobsled goes really fast and there are tons of hazards in the path. So it's an actual challenge and is pretty hard by comparison. We couldn't finish the casino course though, as at first we both kept dying on the same exact obstacle, and then I managed to get through it but my friend didn't, and the race just ends if one of you dies. It's great fun though, and I actually recommend it, though it's very possible that it gets repetitive after a few matches. The next multiplayer in line, Sonic Riders. I actually don't see anyone talking about this one, especially considering how fun I think it is. This one is separated into two different main modes, Tag and Survival. Tag's main gimmick is that your air tank is shared with another character. As a result of this, if you and your partner move too far apart from one another, you'll get shocked. The only way you can tell how far ahead or behind you are from each other is that you can see their picture on the left or right side of your air tank, with a connection icon representing how strong the quote-unquote connection is. The only way to win is to have one of the characters finish in first place, so it doesn't really matter what the position of your partner is, as long as you're always close enough. This means that it's not recommended you use the boost all the time unless you're behind your teammate or you can make a wind path for them to catch up with, or unless you're basically at the finish. At that point it doesn't really matter. I really like this mode because it requires you to think differently from what the game usually asks of you, so it's an actual strategy to slow down intentionally for your partner to catch up to you, and you can even take advantage of this to attack the other team if they get ahead. Survival mode features two different sub-modes, Race Stage and Battle Stage. Race is fine, but it's basically a normal race. The only difference is that you have to reach a Chaos Emerald, then pass through checkpoints while you're in possession of it to get points and refill your air meter. If you run out of air while having the emerald, you'll get shocked and lose it, which can also happen if you get attacked or fall off the stage. If you're the first to reach the point limit, you win. At first I thought something was wrong with this fucking mode, because you needed 95 points to win and there was a 37-minute time limit. Then I left the match and saw that my settings were all messed up for some reason, so I fixed them and played the normal match. And then realized I should have put a higher limit, because the match ended in a minute. It's still fun though, but you have to set a right points tally, otherwise it feels too short or too long. Battle is, at surface level, really fucking cool. You have 3 completely unique maps, all with their own layout and gimmicks. You enter a match, and everything feels so chaotic. Well, at the start at least, then you slowly get the hang of it, but even then it's really crazy. As you might have guessed, the point of the game is to deal damage to your opponents, with every valid hit you deal making them lose 1 of 3 life stars, the same going for you. There are multiple power-ups you can get here, such as a shield, which gives you protection against 1 or 2 hits without losing any lives, an air pack, which expands your air tank, a speed boost, which is crucial at the start to deal damage, an attack item that boosts the damage you deal, basically bypassing the shield, and an egg that almost completely drains your air tank. To hit someone, you have to use the normal attacks present in the races, so you boost into them. Since these matches are so fast and so chaotic, a good feature they added is a lock-on ability, which gets activated with a crosshair when you're close enough to another character, making you follow them and dealing damage. I do think the mode is fun, Sometimes. At some point I feel disoriented from drifting and turning so much, but if you play it with moderation, it's quite enjoyable, even if a bit unfair at times. Speaking of unfair at times, Sonic 06's multiplayer. Don't get me wrong with this intro, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it's probably the best one just behind SA2, which is just behind the next I'll be covering. But there are some sections that... well, I won't get too ahead of myself, we'll get to it. This multiplayer, contrary to all the other ones I've covered, apart from the Rider's Tag, is co-op. This means you and your friends actually have to work together to go through all the stages in the game, except for Tropical Jungle and End of the World. Despite this, the only real co-op parts are the ones where you both need to activate a switch to take down a laser barrier or a cage that has a spring, for example, or needing to kill a bunch of enemies to clear a path for one another. Yeah, when I think of it, a lot of it is working together. But a lot of the gimmicks feel forced to a point that wasn't necessary, with the switches being an example, usually just slowing down the pace for no understandable reason. There are some clever ones, like the rainbow rings disappearing when one of you goes through it, forcing the other to go through a different path, ending up in a different place and needing the other's help to traverse to the next section. It's pretty clever. The levels you play through are only one section of the stage, making some levels, such as the A section of Kingdom Valley, really short, and other looping sections such as the B section of Dusty Desert or the A section of Aquatic Base really long. Aquatic Base specifically was what I meant when I talked about unfair. We lost 9 lives on the same exact area, where we got stuck for 6 minutes and we only managed to get through it because I used the Sky Gem to clip through this door and get a checkpoint, because otherwise we would have lost all our lives. This struggle literally started because one of us died here and the other one had basically no rings, so when these enemies respawned, whoever was in front of the door, which needed both of us to open because of the switches, got barraged by bullets from enemies, dying in the process. Then the other one who was working their way to the door again would get there, die because there were literally no rings remaining in the entire area we were, and then we had to repeat the same process again. We couldn't even do this section together because there is no way you can get there, the enemies disappear. Well, you can if you abuse the gems, but we didn't think of that, and when we did, we just decided to clip through the fucking door. The problem with this is that the lives are shared, so when one of you dies, both of you lose a life. And if you lose all lives, you have to restart the stage all over again. At least you don't have to restart the campaign from the first stage. That would have been the final nail in the coffin. Despite some hurdles, this co-op is actually very enjoyable, and is quite a surprise and a fun experience in a game that people usually associate with pain, so definitely check it out. There is also another multiplayer mode, so I kinda lied again, because it isn't all co-op, as there is also a battle mode, being a race in the same sections of the levels from the tag mode, but without the co-op gimmicks. This doesn't work very well, and it's pretty noticeable that this was just quickly put together, because if one of you is playing as Sonic, they'll just win, as he's much faster than the other two characters. If it's Shadow versus Silver, maybe it's a bit more balanced, but even then I don't really think so. Now, the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place, and in my opinion the best multiplayer mode in the entire franchise. I don't think you're expecting this, but it's the party mode from Sonic and the Secret Rings. Despite the questionable experience that is Secret Rings, its multiplayer works very differently from the actual story mode gameplay, being strangely fleshed out and complex, featuring 40 minigames, a lot more than any other multiplayer in the entire franchise. And even with that, it doesn't get the recognition it deserves. This party mode is designed for 4 players at once, where you can select Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, as well as Amy, Shadow, Cream, Silver and Blaze, so it's a rich roster. It's also heavily inspired in Mario Party and Sonic Shuffle, and you can actually play it single player against bots. Don't let them fool you, because they are insane, especially because I played them in hard mode, which was probably a mistake. There are 6 attractions here, with 5 of them being actual party boards and the World Library being a minigame select basically. These minigames are also shared between all attractions, so there really aren't any specific ones. The first attraction attraction I played, and the one I used to play the most, the treasure hunt. The objective of this game is to be the first to find the treasure Chao shows 3 times. Depending on how well you perform in the minigames, a number of spaces will be given so you can move through the board in all directions, with first awarding you 9, second 6, third 3 and fourth 2. If you fail to find the correct treasure, nothing will happen, you just won't get any points. And after you return to the board, you'll be able to move starting from the point you were at. Besides treasures or empty spaces, the middle spaces are events, where if you land there, you can influence the board by either changing position with another player, shuffling the chests, or to search a different treasure. Shuffling the treasures is a great tactic if you're behind the others in terms of points, as it's really easy to win if no one does it, because the same chest will always have the same item regardless of the treasure change. Even the bots know this, that's why in one turn all 3 of them got a treasure on their first try, and since I didn't know the location of any, because I honestly had forgotten, I ended up going behind. This is one of the games that's probably the most affected by RNG, as it isn't always quote-unquote fair per se. What I mean by that is that a lot of times it doesn't really matter if you finish first or second or even third, because as long as enough chests have been opened and you know where the treasures are, you can make a mental map of them and collect points really easily, as long as you still perform well enough to move. You really only need to avoid finishing last, because you won't be able to land on treasure spaces on the next turn. The first game I played of this, I didn't perform very well. I finished third most times and only finished first once, and still won the match. While Silver lost all of them, he didn't win a single one, and he almost won the entire thing. Even so, it's always my go-to mode when playing this. The second one I played, Pirate's Coast. This one has you taking the role of the captain of your respective pirate ship, being a linear board where you actually win depending on how well you perform, with first place moving 10 spaces, second moving 6, third 4 and fourth only 2. At the end of the board is a secret treasure location, so who gets there first wins. Even though this one is more dependent on merit, there are events that affect how you move through the board, such as wind that either makes you only move half the spaces or double, or whirlpools that don't let you move on the next turn, etc. Of course, as lucky as I am, I only had the shit events and only had a good wind variant when my loss was already sentenced. Even with this, if you perform well, you'll win regardless. It's a more predictable game, so if you prefer that, this one's probably for you. Next is Genie's Lair. Here you're put into a lair of genies with a room full of treasure chests. The player who wins a minigame has the ability to open a chest and earn some points. If you have traps active, you can also get nothing. So here it's fully dependent on merit, as the only person who can open a chest is the one who finishes first. If multiple people finish first, then no one opens anything. The chests can either contain silver or gold coins, which grant 1 or 3 points respectively, or a gold bar, which grants 5. As I've mentioned, you can also activate traps in the settings, and if it wasn't already hard enough to play this because I'm using a fucking candle as the motion bar and playing against hard bots, 3 out of the 4 times I won, there were traps in the chests, and in the one chest that gave me points, I chose to open another one, which had a trap that removed all my points. It probably isn't even possible to win the game, because I just can't believe this is possible. This game can go on for a long time, especially because some traps add new chests and the game only ends when the chests are all opened. I got so tired of it, I didn't even finish, I just quit. World Bazaar is probably the most confusing one out of the bunch at first. Depending on how well you place in a minigame, you earn a certain number of rings. You can then use these rings to bid on carpets that are being auctioned off. The more a carpet is bought, the lower its price will be at the end of the game. And as some carpets are worth more than others due to their rarity, quite a bit of strategy is involved here, as you need to know when to buy which carpets and when to refuse them. How you buy these carpets is also very simple. Chao shows the carpet that's for auction, and you can either choose to bid on it or not. If you're the only one bidding, you get it for all your rings, so you shouldn't waste them on any carpet. If others bid, the one who has more rings will get it, so you have to choose your battles basically. At the end of the game, what the carpets are worth is revealed, and the winning player is the one who gets the most value out of them, which is added to your total ring tally before counting, so if you haven't bought many and you think it isn't worth it to buy any, you can keep your rings as points for the end. The rings are given to all players who own that specific carpet, multiplying by how many of them they have. So if you have 2 units of a carpet that's worth, say, 20 rings, you'll get 40 for example. I can see this being fun for some people. I thought it was confusing and only really understood it afterwards, so I might give it a try try again sometime. The last attraction, Tournament Palace. This one is really straightforward and there really isn't much to it. It's basically a bracket with a set of 1v1 matches. Whoever is the first to reach 1, 2 or 3 rings, depending on your settings, goes on to the next phase. The losers will play consolation matches to determine third place, with the winners fighting afterwards for first. All of these modes are fully dependent on your performance, as no RNG minigames are present in the pool, so it's also one of my favorites. Even though I've talked about the attractions, I haven't talked about the minigames much. Well, there are 40 of them, so of course I won't talk about all of them, but there are a few that are quite amusing, silly or just ridiculous. Before actually talking about them, I want to mention that for some reason, a few minigames got stuck or the bot stopped moving, which I don't remember happening on the Wii, so I'll assume it's an emulation issue. Shadow and Cream also won everything they played, and Silver didn't finish last in all of them because I was competing with him for the worst performance. The most ridiculous by far has to be Watch Out Trap. Here you have to guess the right lock to lift the cell door, otherwise you'll completely open the cell of this fucking ghost that will take your soul away. Stay Tight Big Balloon is also pretty funny, the way the characters are just so afraid of the balloon popping out of nowhere, and the way the losing character falls are just incredible. Some minigames are not exactly special themselves, but the way the game works makes them so. An example is Sink a Pirate Ship, where when the characters manage to hit a ship, they'll always shout, My actual favorite ones for being fun are Flyp Terror Rider, where you actually have to think about movement and momentum to go as further as possible, Spin Propeller Race, which is heavily dependent on timing and skill, even though I still lost, and Hit It Home Run, which is baseball and you get points by hitting a home run. All in all, Sonic and the Secret Rings' party mode is a great experience in my opinion. I don't really recommend emulating the Wii mode for it, as it doesn't work very well. I tried it with some friends of mine and now they keep telling me the game is shit. I think this is pretty well done actually, although flawed, but you can't have everything. And considering that a lot of people haven't played it, please consider doing so. The last multiplayer I wanted to talk about is Sonic Rider Zero Gravity. There are 3 modes here, but I only play 2 of them as the relay mode actually requires 2 people to play, and the others don't. It works like relay, as you might expect. You literally hand the board to your partner at the end of a lap. That's about it. Ball was really confusing to me at first, because the game doesn't really tell you what you need to do exactly. I thought it was a normal football match, so I put the ball into what I thought was the net, but nothing happened. Then I saw what the bots were doing, and they were using the gravity control to pick up the ball, then aim it and throw it inside the floating rings. When I understood this, it actually became really fun. The ball even has an indicator for when you can actually pick it up, so you know when you can aim it right. Even though it becomes kinda easy, it's still very enjoyable, but it can become quite tiring because the controls are very disorientating, especially because if you need to turn around, you do it really slowly. There is also a mode where the ball becomes a bomb, respawning every 10 seconds. I could only pick up the ball once, because the bots apparently know where it spawns every single time, so I could never get to it first. The other mode is Battle, being not exactly an expansion on the original Riders concept, but a different take on it rather. It's much more straightforward and in a much smaller arena, and there are only 2 power-ups, an air refill and missiles, which you need to use the gravity control for to shoot them. They lock in really easily and follow the opponents, even though it doesn't really work very well. They either make you win or lose really easily, as you can literally grab a missile and throw it instantly, but the bots can also do the same thing, and it's even worse when some missiles miss but deal damage anyways, or when they hit but don't do anything for some weird fucking reason. This is terrible because you can't protect against them in any way really. You can also attack with stage elements, as when you use the gravity control you can lift certain floor tiles or walls, which is cool in concept, but I could never use use them to hit anyone. I do think the original Riders iteration of this mode is much better, so I recommend playing that one instead. I know there are other multiplayers I could have or should have mentioned, like Shadow the Hedgehog, which I actually grabbed footage of, but didn't write any info. It was so unmemorable I forgot to take notes, but it's basically a 1v1 with guns. The metal versions of Shadow already start with a gun, weirdly, which can be a bit unfair if you instantly rush the other player. Sonic and the Black Knight also features a free-for-all mode, with some alternate rules and whatnot. I wasn't able to play this, as you actually required the Wiimote and real players unlike Secret Rings, so it wasn't really plausible to play this with anyone in my case. I went to see footage of it online, and I was surprised to hear Rail Canyon from Heroes playing. I thought it was the video author that had added it on their own, but no, the multiplayer in this game really reuses songs from other games, such as Green Forest from SA2 and General Offensive from SA1, which are really out of place. The racing games also feature multiplayer, but it's basically just a split-screen version of the normal races. Now I wanted to finish this video with some extra modes that don't really fit any of the previous categories. The most known of these would be the Chao Garden. It needs no introduction, of course. Here you can raise your Chao and feed them drives and animals that you get from playing stages, and train them so they do better in races, fights and in school, so you can get achievements and emblems. I never got much into it, and I would really love to, but it just seems so daunting of a task I never got around to it. But I know that a lot of people love it, and it would be cool to see a new modern iteration of it. Difficulty options are also frequently featured in Sonic games, most prominently in Heroes, 06 and Frontiers. Heroes features the super hard mode I've already talked about, with Shadow the Hedgehog having an expert mode which functions similarly. 06 features hard variants of its stages, as well as very hard, containing different layouts for every stage they're present in. And Frontiers has the new extreme difficulty, which you can unlock after getting an S rank in all 5 battle rush modes, adding some new stuff. Here you only need to be hit once to die, thus getting attacked by an enemy or an obstacle immediately triggers a game over. Stat level ups are disabled and enemies are substantially stronger, so they deal more damage and have more HP. Cyberspace stages have less forgiving rank requirements. The perfect parry timing before the 1.4.1 update was also half of the hard modes. Yeah, you remember that terrible unforgiving perfect parry from the Master Coco trial. Extreme modes was even worse. As of that update, Extreme mode is now the same as the previous hard modes, with the former's timing being doubled. The last extra mode I'm gonna cover is an actual fully fleshed out mode, being the Sonic Simulator in Colors. This one is also fairly well known, though most people don't really play through its entirety. This can also be considered multiplayer, as you can combine your wisps, but I never really saw it as one, especially when you can use 1.5 players. I refuse it to call it multiplayer. There are 21 stages here, 3 representing each color of the final game's levels. Several layouts of these stages mirror levels from past games, such as Green Hill, Scrap Rain or Spring Yards. Each world is represented by a Chaos Emerald, and after completing every stage, which you have to collect all 180 red star rings to unlock, Super Sonic will be available to play on all stages. The levels themselves are mostly 2D and heavily focused on platforming, while the 3D ones are either quick-step stages, rail switching stages or hold-down boost stages. They have their moments and some parts are quite memorable, but in general it's pretty meh, I think. With as many games as there are in this series, there are a lot of other modes I haven't covered or didn't have the opportunity to dive a bit more into, such as Sonic Unleashed's NPC missions, Sonic Lost Worlds multiplayer or Sonic Forces' episode Shadow. But this video is already massive and I covered everything I thought was interesting to do so in a more relaxed and less analytical style to what I'm accustomed to, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing and activating notifications, as it does really help me out a ton. If you want me to keep doing videos like this, please consider subscribing to my Patreon as well if you have any spare money, as it's quite cheap and it goes a long way in making me keep posting these. I can't promise much really, I can promise 1 week early access to videos and your name at the end of the video, but everything else I'll have to see depending on how many people join. So just know that if you're thinking in supporting me through there. I also have a Twitter if you want to follow me there, and check out my community tab once in a while as I post quite frequently there. And that's about it really. I'll hopefully see you soon.